Hello and welcome back to the channel with myself, Gooder. Now, roughly 100 years old, Nosferatu is an unofficial adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it's become one of the enduring examples of silent cinema. Henrik Galeen, an influential figure in the development of German expressionist cinema in the silent period, was tasked by Prana Studio founders Enrico Dachmann and Albin Grau to write a screenplay that was inspired by Stoker's novel. Galeen transferred the story to the German town of Weisborg, introduced some new elements like the vampire count bringing a plague to the town, whilst removing other aspects of the story such as the Van Helsing style character. The film is quite possibly the point where the idea of vampires being killed by sunlight entered the commonly understood mythology of vampires, since in Stoker's novel Dracula was weakened by the sun but not directly killed by it as Orlok is here. The film begins with Thomas Hutter being sent to Transylvania to open up negotiations with a new client. This client is Count Orlok, who plans to buy a house in Hutter's hometown. And during his journey, Hutter encounters locals who fear even just the mention of Orlok's name. That night at Orlok's castle, Hutter accidentally cuts himself during dinner, and the Count attempts to suck the blood from the wound. An unnerved Hutter later finds bite marks on his neck, which he puts down to mosquitoes. As the pair meet to sign the property papers, Orlok notes a picture of Hutter's wife, Ellen, and remarks on her beauty. Increasingly concerned by his host's behaviour, Hutter takes himself to bed, hiding under it as Orlok enters his room uninvited at midnight. Meanwhile, back at home, Ellen, in a trance, walks out onto the balcony, shouting for Hutter as he seemingly is able to see events occurring in the castle far away. The next day, Hutter finds Orlok resting in a crypt, and that morning, before witnessing a number of coffins being loaded up onto a coach and driven away. We follow the coffins as they are transported by boat to Weisborg, the crew killed mid-journey, and upon arrival, Orlok moves into his new home, which is opposite Hutter's. Deaths begin to occur in the town, and these are blamed upon a plague. The film comes to a climax. Ellen, fearing that the Count is indeed a vampire, has learnt that such a creature can be defeated if a pure woman distracts them with her beauty, in a nice kind of vague thing there. Opening the window to let Orlok in, she faints, and as Hutter rushes to fetch a doctor, the Count enters and attacks Ellen. But he is caught in the daylight as the sun rises and appears to vanish in a puff of smoke. Ellen then dies as Hutter embraces her. The Count's appearance is still striking to this day, and often its influence can still be seen in various depictions of vampires. His long nose, bald head, and claw-like fingernails, though, are reminiscent of caricatures of Jewish people from the time, which does perhaps suggest some anti-Semitic undertones to the film. A little bit more so when you consider the way Orlok's buying of a German property prompts such hostility, and also his connection to the rats is another factor that was often seen in anti-Jewish propaganda. Although it is unclear how much these parallels were intentional, as the film's director, F.W. Murnau, was known to be friendly with a number of Jewish families. But it's certainly a factor which a lot of discourse around the film looks at. I mean, there is definitely a fear of the other element in there, certainly at the very core, much like there is in Stoker's original novel. Like many of the surviving films of its age, multiple different cuts and scores exist for the film, but whichever version you watch, it still stands up as an impressive example of early expressionist cinema, and its influence on vampire mythology and horror cinema cannot be understated. Indeed, there was the film Shadow of the Vampire, a fictionalised retelling of Nosferatu's production, which built upon the pop culture myth that the actor Max Schreck, who played Count Orlok, was indeed himself a vampire. The film was released in 2000 to a lot of critical praise. These days you can find Nosferatu here on YouTube, and it is well worth your time if you've not seen it before. Join us again soon when we'll take another quick look at some classics.